This is going to be a seismic shift in the music ecosystem, bigger than file sharing, bigger than streaming, bigger than the invention of the accordion.
Matt Adell is the Chief Operating Officer at Musical.ai, a veteran of the digital frontier. From Napster to AI, he's seen every disruption shake the music business, and now he's helping to lead one that could redefine it all.
We connect rights holders and AI companies so that they can work together successfully and in a licensed environment to allow intellectual property to be used by AI companies in a licensed manner that compensates the original creators.
His company is building the bridge between creators and machines, making sure artists stay protected while technology moves forward. In this episode, he explains how innovation, law, and artistry can actually coexist.
We believe AI payments should operate similarly, that the music that is creating more value should get paid more than the music that isn't used as much.
In this conversation, Matt explains how AI could reshape the way artists get paid, exploring what fair compensation looks like when machines are trained on human creativity. Stick around. I'm Bobby Owsinski, and this is the Inner Circle podcast. You've been in music tech for so long. Is there something that people don't understand about music AI that you keep on finding?
Oh, well, there's an endless list of things we all don't understand about music and AI. We're all still learning. There are people who are willfully ignorant about certain aspects of it for their financial benefit, but mostly there are just people who haven't been exposed to enough of what's going on in the industry to sort of be aware. And then, of course, there are technological issues involved, and I by no means am a technologist, but I know just enough to be dangerous and wrong sometimes. I'd say there's too many things to come up with just one, but I will give sort of a highlight. AI does not think. It is a giant calculator that looks at a huge amount of data, and when you ask it to do something, it calculates the right, most likely answer to what you asked it to do based on all the information it has digested. So when you ask a chatbot to help you shop for, well, I was just shopping for a new drum set. And when you ask it to help you find the right drum set, it doesn't think about you and come up with the right answer. It looks for the most common answer in all the data it has digested and paraphrases that back at you. It might be wrong. It might make up an answer. If it trained on a lot of data that was bad advice, you're going to get bad advice. All of that said, I'm still using it to help me pick a drum set to buy.
Yeah. Once you start using it, it's hard to stop, that's for sure. Let's talk about your company. Why don't you describe what you do?
We connect rights holders and AI companies so that they can work together successfully and in a licensed environment to allow intellectual property to be used by AI companies in a licensed manner that compensates the original creators involved in creating the music and other information that the AI companies train on. At the highest level, we identified 2.5, almost 3 years ago, that this is going to be a seismic shift in the music ecosystem, bigger than file sharing, bigger than streaming, bigger than the invention of the accordion. We immediately saw that unmanaged, it was an existential threat to copyright owners, to musicians, to composers, and created enormous risks for technology companies that wanted to offer these kinds of services to users. And so we set out to solve the basic problem of helping rights holders make sure they are in control of their own data, and helping AI companies know that the data they're training on won't result in a lawsuit, and that the data they're training on is of the highest quality so that they can create great products.
This is very symbiotic with something that just happened to me. I've written a lot of books, 24, 26, something like that. I kind of forgot. and they're managed by multiple publishers. And one parent company of a publisher, I had no idea who it was, sends me the stack of agreements, email, saying, you should sign these. It has to do with AI of your books. And I'm looking at these books, and they're all old. And some of them are even out of print and everything. So I dashed off an email. I said, what's this all about? And they said, well, it's for, you should get compensated for the training in your books. Even if they're old and even if they're out of print, it doesn't matter. It's still being used for training. I thought, okay, this is something worthwhile here. So I signed on, but it was only for a slew of books. It's probably a third of what I'm involved with. And it got me thinking, okay, how do I go about with the other books?
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing the same thing. Is what you do only pertaining to music?
Today, what we do is only pertaining to music. But at the core of our technology is an invention by our CTO, Nicholas. And what he invented is a way to look at the training data and look at the outputs that come from the AI company and determine how much influence did each piece of training data have on the output. Because depending on what someone output, it's going to be more or less similar to each piece of training data. And I'm sure you're familiar with, when something gets played on Spotify, it registers a play for the song on Spotify. And the songs that get more plays make more money than the songs that got fewer plays. We believe AI payments should operate similarly, that the music that is creating more value and being used more in the training and the outputs should get paid more than the music that isn't used as much, isn't creating as much value for the end user. And so what Nicholas has invented is AI attribution, that every time there's an output, we can tell you this song in the training data had a 21% influence on the output. This song had a 4% influence on the output. This song had a 0.01% influence on the output. And what you then have there is a fair and transparent way to share a dollar. And that's core to what we do. And Nicholas's technology is actually modal and model agnostic. And that means two important things. One, it works no matter what technology is being used for the training or the output creation. It doesn't matter if it's stability model or some custom model. Our technology works the same way no matter what. Let's say an AI company is using the stability technology. They update stability to 8.3 or whatever. Our technology doesn't have to be updated. It's agnostic to that. The second really important thing about this technology Nico invented is that it is modal agnostic. It works on all content types and all training data. We are all endemic to music. We wanted to solve this problem for music. And as I'm sure you and your listeners know, music is usually the first digital media that gets trial by fire and copyright changes and digital transformations in the market. So we decided to work there first. But we will be moving into television and film, video, and obviously almost all video is not silent. It includes music and speech. And so we will be moving into those areas and other concentric circles in the near future. Text is an interesting question. However, when I ask an AI thing to generate a song for me, that is a very subjective output. If I ask a chat AI to tell me a fact, like what year was John Lennon born? That's a fact. And that fact probably exists in millions of the inputs that it read. So tying that factoid back to the training data is an interesting challenge that's a little bit different than if you're asked, because it's an objective answer, that is a little bit different than in the subjective space. I don't believe that AI actually engages in acts of creativity. But let's just presume for a moment that we call the outputs creative outputs. Creative outputs are easier to attribute than factoid outputs around text. So I'm not sure how text is going to get sorted out. Using my example, use a different example. What year was John Lennon assassinated? That exists in tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of newspaper articles. So which newspaper article do you give credit for that factoid appearing in the output is a challenge we have not addressed. We're really focused on media and the desire human beings have of creating/generating media that allows them to self-express. And our attribution technology is really good at tying those loose ends together.
It sounds like a brilliant technology, but I'm curious, isn't the output of an AI, isn't that private? So how would you know if it's private?
Because the AI companies that we partner with, we get the outputs.
Okay.
We don't look at them like humans, but they get run through a system that creates this attribution report.
Okay, that makes sense. Hey, quick pause. Have you ever felt like your mixes are close, but just not quite to the level that you hear from the pros? The truth is, even with today's powerful home studios, it's the techniques that make all the difference. The Mixing Engineer's Handbook, now in its 6th edition, walks you through these techniques step by step, from EQ and compression to immersive audio and the latest plugins. You'll also hear directly from some of the world's top mixers through exclusive interviews and bonus content. If you want your mixes to sound polished and professional no matter what setup you're working on, scan the QR code on screen or click the link in the show notes. Now, back to the conversation. You just mentioned how music always seems to be the guinea pig of technology. And you've been in music tech for a long time in different capacities. Has it ever fell behind technology music, in other words? Because usually it's on the cutting edge. In your experience, has it ever been behind? Is it behind something now?
Well, in the world of AI, things are moving very quickly. Rights holders seem to know that there's a desire by consumers to use this technology. And as such, there's a business opportunity there. I have a very different opinion about how the record industry handled illegal file sharing than a lot of other people. I actually think that the big recording companies handled it perfectly. Lots of people said, if they should have licensed the illegal services, if only they moved faster, Well, look where we are today. Almost every piece of commercial music ever made is immediately accessible by consumers, which I love. I think most people love that level of access and to enjoy whatever they want, whenever they want, wherever they are. And these are giant public companies that have responsibilities to their shareholders. And in hindsight, it seems like they played their cards perfectly well. Imagine instead, if I have a new business model, I'm going to open up a car dealership selling stolen BMWs. And I steal them right from the manufacturing plant. Would BMW be foolish for not letting me do that? No, of course not. I'm stealing their stuff. And I'm not talking about the users of file sharing networks stealing the stuff. I'm talking about at the time, $1 million businesses that were operating these illegal file sharing networks and the $1 billion ISPs that were benefiting from illegal file sharing because it was bringing joy to their telecom users. And so absolutely the labels needed to make it painful for people to steal their stuff. In hindsight, it seems like it moved pretty quickly. I mean, in my lifetime, we went from, there being a couple hundred new releases a week on physical product to there being over 150,000 new releases every day to great benefit to consumers. I grew up working in record stores.
Yeah.
And my job effectively was to have people come into the store and say, hey, do you know that song that goes blah, 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 blah? And they only want that one song. All I can do is sell them a $20 CD where they're not going to like most of the songs on that CD. And now the consumer can just listen to the songs they love. And now the artists that make songs people love make more money than the artists who can trick people into buying a $20 CD because that song was pushed on radio. So I actually think we've landed in a really good place. Now, obviously, musicians are having a hard time making as much money as they used to. But the real problem there is that there are too many musicians. And there's too much music, and consumers don't pay enough for it. When I was in the record store business, the average CD buyer spent $120 a year on CDs. And that was a good buyer, right? And most people didn't buy CDs. Most people listen to music on the radio where they didn't pay for it at all. But the people who did spend money were spending about $120 a year. How much does it cost to subscribe to a streaming service per year right now? $120 a year. And so that means that that price hasn't been adjusted for inflation. I would posit that 3 or 4 or 5 times that amount would be a more a better amount to pay for access to all the music you want to listen to all year. And so one problem, a reason why musicians aren't making enough money is we're not charging consumers enough for accessing all of humanity's recorded music whenever and wherever they want it. And additionally, it's mathematically impossible for anyone to be the Beatles again.
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned about an oversupply of musicians. Let's say an oversupply of artists, not musicians. The reason why I say that
or let's just say music, oversupply of music.
Yeah. But it's so much easier to make than it used to be. Mm-hmm. Because, when I grew up, everybody, had to be in a band. You had to play with other people. The politics involved, the time you had to put in until you got good at it. And now all you have to do is sit in your room and, have some technology, have a workstation, whatever, keyboard. And if you're using AI, you don't even need that. That being said, that's contributed to the oversupply that we have.
Absolutely.
For better or for worse.
And the lack of needing a record label.
Yeah.
I mean, so the first wave of this oversupply happened as soon as digital services arrived. And then, because it used to be you had to convince the local bar to book you, right? And you had to convince someone at a distributor that your music was good enough to be worth putting on a truck and driving around the whole country with to record stores. Then when digital happened, you still had to convince a digital distributor your music was good enough to distribute. But shortly thereafter, the self-publishing of music through distributors that will take anything occurred. And that was the first flood of music oversupply because filters had been removed. You and I could sing Row, Row, Row Your Boat together right now, and we could have it on Spotify by next Friday. We could add to the oversupply problem right now. I'm a drummer. I was in punk rock bands growing up, but I make music on a computer now. I don't distribute it because no one should have to hear what I make. I do it for myself. But imagine if everyone who played golf thought they deserved to get paid to play golf. That is the metaphor I use around music today because there's no filters. Anyone can pay X dollars as a fee to a DIY distribution platform, get their stuff up on the streaming service, and then those people complain that they can't make a living. Not everyone gets to make a living from the creative arts. That's life.
Yeah, somebody once told me that making a living is the new success. And that really makes a lot of sense when you think about it. I mentioned about the oversupply of artists. You can do what we both do. Sit in your home studio and make music with technology. That's not to say that I know when I was growing up, if I had the opportunity, that I wouldn't do that as well. Because it's so easy. And again, you kind of bypass all the heartaches of playing in a band. And those have done it know what it's like, for better or for worse.
I loved being in a band, but it was hard.
Yeah, right. I did too.
But self-expression is innate to the human condition. And people will always gravitate towards tools that allow them to self-express. I'm sure there were people who were mad when the harpsichord was invented because it made playing the harp too easy.
Yeah, right. Well, drummers are drum machines. It's kind of the same thing. Synthesizers and orchestra players. Yeah, sampling.
It's all a continuum.
Well, let's go there for a second because you have some experience with Beatport and sounds.com. Talk a little bit about that. Take me through your background.
I grew up working in record stores. It was a little embarrassing. I always wanted to be a music executive, when I was a little kid. I don't know why. I don't know where I got that. And I worked for a little independent punk rock label in San Francisco when I first got to college. CD Presents. They put out Billy Bragg's records, his very first independent records. And I just loved being part of helping get people's art out to people who loved listening to it. And I worked in record stores again in college after high school. And then I went back to Chicago and I got a job in the shipping department of Wax Trax Records, the industrial dance music label, which had already been around for several years. And within a year, I was the vice president of A&R and business development at the label. Jim Nash and Danny Fleischer, the couple who founded it, had a tremendous impact on me. They loved music so much that they lost a lot of money on a lot of records and made a little bit of money on some records. But I was lucky enough to work with KMFDM, Ministry offshoots like the Revolting Cocks, My Life with the Thrill Kill Cult. I got to sign the KLF to Wax Trax. We worked with Coil, Meat Beat Manifesto. It was a real transformative time in my life. I loved it. And it set me up for success for the rest of my life. After that, I started my own house music label called Organico Records in Chicago. For those of you who don't know, house music was invented in Chicago, not in Amsterdam. And by the way, it was invented by queer Black folks. Credit is due. And I put out some records by my friend Derek Carter, put out some records by a great band in San Francisco called Dub Tribe Sound Machine, Dub Tribe Sound System, and was packing records in my basement, sending them to record stores. Loved that as well, but I hemorrhaged cash. I was managing inventory. When you put out a record, you had to press a bunch of records. And then the internet happened. And my then lawyer for my indie label went to work for Motorola, building really early streaming technology. I went to work there. And that's where I found my love of digital. As soon as I saw that on our internet radio stations, I could see a report that told me which songs were causing people to turn off the internet radio station. And I could even see where inside the song was causing most people to change the channel. I was hooked. That was so much better than trying to watch a dance floor to see if they were liking your DJ set. The idea that I knew in that granular level of detail what was bringing people joy and what wasn't, so that I could offer them more joy with music, I was hooked. And I was there for a while. We built some really cool early products that never saw the light of day with the Grateful Dead, with the Smashing Pumpkins. And they were all just highly experimental streaming products. Then I found my way to Music Now in Chicago, ran music and product there, the very first music subscription service with all the major labels. We sold that to a little company called AOL. I'm probably skipping some layers here, but then I made my way to Los Angeles, where I always wanted to live. I ended up running music and product at Napster when it was legal, when we were paying people. I like to remind everyone. And Napster was effectively a streaming service. But again, this was before the smartphone existed. And streaming did not matter before the existence of the smartphone. Smartphone was invented and popularized while I was at Napster. Started to see real consumer adoption in streaming. And we sold it to Best Buy, of all people. Around that time, I was thinking it might be time to do something else. And I found my way to Beatport, where I joined as the chief operating officer. And about 6 months later, I was the CEO. And I knew of Beatport. I was a dance music fan, a former DJ, loved what the founders had built, and was very, very fortunate to join Beatport just as the EDM bubble was kicking off, and rode that wave, grew Beatport substantially, helped the founders and shareholders sell it to a larger company. It was an incredible experience. And then found my way I started another company called Metapop. I sold it to Native Instruments. I was the chief digital officer at Native Instruments for a while. We launched sounds.com, which was meant to be a Splice competitor that I don't think exists anymore. It wasn't successful. Proof that no matter how many successes you have, you're going to have misses as well. You can't be right all the time. And then I found myself working for private equity during COVID, helping private equity companies buy music tech companies, and then found my way to musical AI 2.5, 3 years ago. But my time at Beatport was really, really special. I love dance music. I love ecstatic dancing in front of the speakers. I'm an old school raver. I'm not really a fancy nightclub guy, if you will. I'm not a bottle service guy. I'm more of a dirty warehouse kind of guy. But I don't care what music the end user likes, and I don't care where they listen to it. I care about delivering joy. And Beatport was an incredible team of 100 people who were focused on delivering joy. It was an incredible experience.
Okay, I have a question for you. So you started as a drummer in a punk band. How does a punk drummer find his way to being a DJ, which they seem opposed, and then into dance music, which is even more opposed? How does that happen?
The short answer is Chicago.
Oh, yeah, okay.
In high school, I was in a punk band. I worked at a record store. Steve Albini, rest in peace, the famous music producer, was a student at Northwestern University. He came in our record store all the time. We were the first record store he brought the first big black records into, his first band. And he recorded my high school punk rock band. And we got to open for Big Black, and we opened for GBH and other really cool punk bands in Chicago. Having worked in record stores, I always loved all kinds of music. I don't love all music personally. That would mean I had no taste. Everyone should have their own taste. But so I loved early hip hop. I remember buying Grandmaster Flash, The Message at Laurie's Records on Sherman Avenue in Evanston with my allowance. I mean, I was really young. I felt a punk rock ethos with early hip hop.
Yeah, I get that.
And so I always loved early hip hop. And then I started to be interested in psychedelic music. And I loved going to see the Grateful Dead.
Really good dance music there.
Well, if you're high enough. And then frankly, electronic dance music, house music is also psychedelic music.
Yeah.
And so, I started a house music label. I was DJing clubs. I wasn't a radio DJ. I was always a dance music rave DJ. Just like my punk rock drumming, I was never great at it. But I was always lucky enough to be able to open early for people who were really awesome. I loved doing it. Yeah, that was the crossover. And I still listen to punk rock. I still make electronic dance music in my computer. I'm going to see Dwight Yoakam on Wednesday. I'm really freaking excited about that. I love music.
Yeah, I'll say, boy, talk about eclectic tastes. Wow. Varied tastes. Very cool. Matt, what's one thing that people don't know about you that you wish they did?
Gosh, I don't know. I will say that I'm going to share some personal information. I'm sober now, 160 days.
Congratulations.
And I'm part of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I share that because if anybody else is concerned about their own drinking or drug use, there's a place they can go to get help. And people like me are waiting for them there. That's it, I guess.
Some of my best friends have been in the program for a long, long time. So
it's a blessing.
I'm quite familiar with, and I've gone to meetings with them and gatherings and everything. So I understand the ethos completely. And yes, when you need help, that's a good place to go. Last question, Matt. You've been around for a long time. You've been through a lot of different businesses and exposure to a lot of different business acumen, especially. You mentioned working for private equity, for instance, which is way different than everything else. What's the best piece of advice that you've either received or you learned along the way?
It might not always be the best move to make what you love, what you try to do for a living, if you want to be happy. And always say to yourself, wait, why am I talking? You are always better off listening than talking yourself. That is the best advice I've ever gotten. I wish I got it sooner. I wish that I was better at taking it to heart, but I do every day now. Listen more and talk less.
It's a great piece of advice. Thanks for listening and being in my inner circle. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, you can send them to questions@bobbyowsinski.com. You can also learn all about the latest in music, audio, and production news, and find out about openings for my latest online classes at bobbyowsinski.com. This is Bobby Owsinski. I will see you next time.